A process shows how something happens, how something works, or how something is done. An instruction tells you how to do something. So this quick introduction is going to provide information on the basic approaches to writing instructions and what the technical writer should bear in mind. And it's important to mention from the very beginning that instructions are common. They are all over the place, but they are important for both the writer and the end user of a particular product, which usually comes with a set of instructions, whether to assemble a particular item, to disassemble, or whatever the instruction is all about. So by end of this unit, you should be able to define what an instruction is. We have already given the definition, which is a step-by-step guideline or actions of how to do something. You should also be able to prepare a set of simple instructions using simple formatting procedures. And you should also use appropriate language, especially voice, when writing instructions. And it's also important that by the time we are done, you should have an understanding of the legal issues surrounding the writing of instructions. So first of all, we defined instructions as a step-by-step guideline or a set of actions of how to do something. And as you prepare instructions, it's important to bear in mind these 6 things, because they are the core of what an instruction is all about. Number 1, it's important to know the legal issues. Number 2, it's important to know how to organize the material for writing an instruction. And number 3, it's important to take note of the notes, the precautions, the cautions, the warnings, and the danger notices or signals that accompany instructions. Number 4, it's important to have or to know the list of tools and materials that are needed to accomplish the instruction. And number 5, instructions are in most cases, or almost all the time, written in chronological order. And number 6, it's important to use the command voice. If you go back to our previous discussion, we talked about the different types of language styles, such as the passive indicative mood, the active indicative mood, and the active imperative mood. And for instructions, we use the command voice, the imperative mood, the active voice, because you are telling someone how to do something. Now, the specific contents of a set of instructions are as follows. You need a title for your instructions, and the title of your instructions should be task-oriented. For example, how to cook beans, task-oriented. How to change oil in a car, task-oriented. The title page should include a graphic which represents the topic or the instructions that you are discussing in the text you are writing. So a graphic or a visual is an important part of a set of instructions. You also need to have an introduction, just like you need an introduction in any other type of writing. This introduction should explain why the instruction will be performed. So if it's an instruction on how to assemble the component parts of a fridge, then you should explain why that instruction should be performed. You also need to indicate the required tools or equipment needed to accomplish the instruction itself. So for example, you may need a screwdriver or a set of screws depending on what it is you have to assemble, disassemble, or fix. Or you may need, for example, electricity to use a drill, again depending on the nature of the task. So the equipment and the tools should be listed. In providing the reader or your audience with those instructions, it is important that the instructions are numbered. Remember, you are not there in person to read out the instructions to your audience or to the reader or to the user. So it's important that your instructions are clear. Therefore, numbering instructions is of utmost importance, and there are different types of numbering formats that you can adopt as a writer. We can focus on the use of Arabic numbers and letters combined, where you have Arabic numbers, they are used for each major section, and letters are used for the subsections. That's one way of formatting or numbering your instructions. Or you can use the digit-dot-digit decimal system, where sections are numbered with successive Arabic numbers, a dot and a 0. So for example, instruction number 1, 1.0, number 2, 2.1, number 3, 3.1, and so on and so forth. So it's important that you adopt a consistent numbering style, and the digit-dot-digit decimal system is one way of making sure that your instructions are in a graded order and they show the required subsections. And you also need the action verbs. I mentioned this earlier on when I talked about the use of the command voice or the active voice or the imperative mood. So the use of action verbs give the reader or the audience the action that they need to perform. So for example, press the button, lift the lid. Press and lift are action verbs. They tell the reader what to do. Each step should clearly be developed with specific details. So you may have an instruction that says press the button, but that instruction may have a subset of other instructions under it. So specific details are needed if a particular step in the instruction is slightly longer and probably complex. You also need to consider hazards. Are hazards provided in your set of instructions? By hazards, I'm referring to warnings, dangers, cautions, notes, and so on. So for example, if someone will be handling a hot piece of equipment, it's important that under that step in the instruction you put a warning: the oil in the car is hot, so that they can take necessary measures to ensure that they don't burn themselves. As we mentioned at the beginning, the use of graphics to help the readers to understand the steps is very important. Sometimes you may need to have a flow diagram to show how the process, or rather how the instructions must move, or how the steps must be performed in a particular chronological order. So one thing has to be done before the next is done. So it's important to have a graphic which shows how the steps move, so that the reader understands. And lastly, but not the least, as usual, the conclusion is an important part of an instruction, and it helps to sum up the discussion in a clear and concise manner. So the format of your description of instructions, therefore, should have a title and a graphic. There must be an introduction. The tools and equipment that is required should be listed. The instructions themselves, which are numbered, and they should begin with a verb, and they should be accompanied by cautions and warnings where necessary. And the conclusion is also an important part of writing instructions.